So you have $35,000 to $40,000 for your next American muscle car or sports car, and you're not sure if you want to choose the top tier 5th generation Camaro ZL1 or the mid-tier C6 Corvette Grand Sport. In this video, we're gonna go over the pros and cons, the similarities and differences between the 5th Gen ZL1 and the C6 Grand Sport, and then we're gonna take them out for a drive in order for me to decide which one of these two do I prefer, and hopefully by the end of the video, you can make an educated decision on which one you prefer, the 5th Gen ZL1 or the C6 Grand Sport. For the 5th Gen ZL1, we are going to have, of course, the LSA 6.2 liter supercharged V8 engine that from factory made about 580 crank and about 560 pound-feet of torque. Now this car has some modifications that have been done to it that gives it 570 wheel horsepower, or about 650 to 660 crank horsepower. And that's thanks to a lower pulley upgrade, long tube headers, larger injectors, cold air intake, and the rest is factory exhaust system, which is a entirely different story for our friend here, the C6 Corvette Grand Sport, which has a 6.2 liter V8 engine, which is the LS3, same thing that I had on my Camaro SS. However, this one makes 430 crank horsepower and about 420 pound-feet of torque. Now, this one, like my Camaro, also has a few modifications done to it, really just being the long tube headers, which gives it around 440, 445. The C6 Corvette Grand Sport comes in at 3,300 pounds versus the 5th Gen ZL1 that comes in at 4,080 pounds. 2 tons. That is a shocking difference between the two of them in terms of weight, almost 800 pounds. Now, delivering the power of the 5th generation ZL1's LSA engine is going to be either a 6-speed manual transmission or a 6-speed automatic transmission. In this situation, it's a 6-speed manual transmission. For the C6 Grand Sport, it's going to be the same ordeal. If you decide to get a manual transmission for the C6 Grand Sport, you are going to get a dry sump oil system versus a wet sump oil system that's found in the automatic. For the 5th Gen ZL1, it doesn't really matter if you decide to get a manual or an automatic, you're gonna get the wet sump system regardless. Now, helping these cars stop is both going to be 6-piston brakes in the front and then 4 pistons in the rear. And obviously both of these cars are limited slip differential. With the 5th Gen ZL1, you would get a diff cooler standard, which the Grand Sport in this situation does have because it's a manual and it's a later year model. Both of these cars have a very special feature, which is the magnetic ride control. Now, for the 5th generation ZL1, the magnetic ride control was a standard feature. The C6 Corvette Grand Sport next to me is a Centennial Edition, so that does come with a magnetic ride control, and it is an option for the higher trim models like the C6 Grand Sport, the Z06, and the ZR1. In all of the years that I've been around the C6 Corvette, this is the first one that I see that actually comes with the magnetic ride control option. I think it'd be a good time to talk about these cars' exterior characteristics, which, by the way, guys, it's only gonna come down really to personal preference. The C6 Grand Sport is built like a 50 caliber bullet. The 5th Gen ZL1 is built more like a heavy artillery shell. They're both made to maximize damage, and in this case, both of the cars are designed to maximize aerodynamics and cooling. Of course, the more aerodynamic is going to be the C6 Grand Sport because of the nature of the design. But ultimately, guys, it's gonna come down to your personal preference. Stock for stock, I'm choosing the 5th Gen ZL1. The conversation of the interior is also going to be a somewhat subjective conversation to have, because at the end of the day, you're not buying these cars anymore for the tech features and all of that stuff. That doesn't really matter. For example, this car has heads-up display. It also has an infotainment system with a screen here. This one is touchscreen versus the C6 Grand Sport that is not touchscreen from factory. But again, it's a very archaic version, so it's always delayed. You have Bluetooth that works with modern phones, so that's really the only thing that matters, in my opinion. Can it play music? Yes, and is the Boston Premium Auto Speakers good? Yeah. It's pretty good. You do get stuff like heated seats in the ZL1, but it actually comes with a lot of Alcantara from factory, like over here on the dashboard, leather seats with Alcantara. Even on the steering wheel, if you spec'd it out. Unfortunately, if you didn't spec it out, you get a leather one, but I can't understand for the life of me why on earth they took away the Camaro badge and put the same Chevy bow tie that you would have on an Impala. It's a running joke in my comment sections. You also get some Alcantara here with the shifter and the boot. Another cool feature about the 5th Gen ZL1 that the C6 Grand Sport does not have is going to be the gauge clusters here that have different meters. It's just really cool to see that that's kind of like a retro, modern type of taste, which is why I really love the 5th Gen interior compared to the C6 Grand Sport. The best thing about having a Camaro versus a Corvette has to be the space and storage. Obviously, the Camaro has 2 extra seats in the back, so you could take, you know, your child or friends or more storage space. Trunk storage for the Camaro is comically terrible at the opening. It inhibits so many things to put in, even though the storage is actually not that bad. It goes pretty deep. But again, if you're buying this car, storage isn't necessarily your biggest concern, but it is a one-up when you compare it to the C6 Grand Sport. If we're comparing stock for stock, non-heritage edition, I'm choosing the 5th Gen ZL1 all day in terms of interior styling. However, because this is the Centennial edition, it has a lot more flair to it, like this Alcantara steering wheel. It also has Alcantara door handles, this Alcantara cubby cover, the handbrake, the shifter here that also feels really nice, and these nice sporty seats over here as well. This one definitely is subjectively in my opinion, the better choice. Now, another thing that I noticed instantly is just how spacious the 5th Gen ZL1 is compared to the C6 Grand Sport. Now, in terms of height, I'm about 6'2". I have plenty of headroom and leg room. I haven't really adjusted it too much. And by the way, this has memory seats that the 5th generation ZL1 does not have. But in terms of like width, it's a little bit tighter for sure. But just like the Camaro ZL1, you get pretty cool features like the heads-up display. You also get heated seats, leather seats, as I mentioned before. You also get a push-to-start system versus the twist-to-start. You know, that's like peasant stuff. Come on, Camaro. Now, for all of you audiophiles, the C6 Grand Sport does have a different type of speaker system. This one has actual Bose speakers versus the Camaro ZL1 that has Boston. Now, the storage, I think, has to be the most impressive thing about the Corvette in terms of practicality. You can fit some pretty large suitcases that you actually would not be able to fit conventionally inside of the 5th Gen ZL1 through the trunk. You'd have to move down the seat. It's just annoying. Here you can just throw it in the back. Yes, it doesn't have the 2 seats, but hey, if you don't like the friends that you have and you want to bring them with them, throw them in the back here. I mean, what are they gonna do? So now let's go ahead and see how these 2 wonderful American V8s sound, and then let's take it for a drive. Ladies and gentlemen, so we are behind the wheel of my 5th Gen ZL1. Let's do our first pull. Oh my God. It is so astonishing just how much torque and explosive power you have with the 5th Gen ZL1. I mean, it's obviously thanks to that supercharger and the mods that I have on this thing, but my God, is that violent. It's actually one of my favorite things about the Camaros, and of course the supercharged Camaros, that they have just so much low-end torque, and even when you're really revving it up high, you still get a good kick and a good feedback. It's like a continuous and really heightened progressive pull that you would get on an NA, just a little bit more, and of course, with a little bit more whine. Just rowing through the gears is just such a beautiful thing to do, man. The American 6.2 liter V8 sound, the downshifts, the screams from the whine. I mean, it is all just playing together beautifully. That is something that you're just not going to be able to get with the LS3 Grand Sport. All right, so we're going to give it a little bit of gas and let's test out these brakes. Oh my gosh, yeah, so that is obviously something that you're going to get very apparently with these Camaros, is just how much of the weight transfer you feel. The 6-piston brakes in the front and then the 4 pistons in the rear do a great job, but that weight transfer is just so unbelievably noticeable. I want to see how it is when we take it on a little bit more curvy roads. Woo! Holy crap! You do feel how heavy this car is, especially if you've had some exposure to other cars like I have, and it is definitely a huge difference from my Camaro SS. I mean, I have plenty of videos running the two of them, and it's quite night and day of a difference, especially when you check the speedometer and realize just how fast you're going, all within the limits, but that is crazy. There's a C4 right in front of me. I wonder if he feels intimidated knowing that there's a 660-ish horsepower behind him. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and switch it over to PTSM track mode, which basically enables the sports suspension from the magnetic ride. It also helps with the active handling, so it gives it a little bit more of a stiffer sensation. Definitely tell the difference between the Tour mode and the Sport Plus mode. I mean, it is so night and day. Electric steering, I think at these turns are not too blatantly obvious, but it still feels very planted considering the weight, 4,000 pounds. Into it, not giving it gas, because even though this thing has the appropriate suspension, you still have to give this car a lot of respect. Yes, there's a little bit of body roll, but again, this is a 4,000 pound vehicle. Basically, what you need to know is that the Camaro ZL1 does a pretty good job at holding its place on the corners, and definitely helps mask the fact that this car weighs 4,000 pounds. That is so freaking impressive how good this thing handles, man. So now we're going to take it a little bit easier and let's talk more about how this car drives under normal circumstances, right? Non-performance related. It is a very comfortable drive. Everything about it, the space, the seats, I mean, the shifting itself in an aggressive fashion, it's very doable and efficient and precise. But just to drive this very conservatively and relaxed, it's also in the same ballpark. I mean, look at that. You could literally do it with a finger. And again, you don't have to really worry too much about clearance when you're driving this on bumpy roads or going up and on different sort of ramps. And if I really wanted to drive this in a conservative fashion, this is the muscle or sports car for that. But let's be honest, we're not gonna drive a Camaro ZL1 conservatively. Alright guys, so now we are behind the wheel of the C6 Corvette Grand Sport, and the first thing that you're going to really notice about the C6, really any Corvette, is just how low you are to the ground. It's such a unique driving experience and attribute of the Corvette, especially when you compare it to the Camaro. Something that I know for sure is going to help out with the handling. Getting started and getting rolling on this manual transmission, it's very smooth, very easy. The clutch is friendly, it's not too aggressive. Also the shifter, which we'll cover later on when we drive it in a more performance fashion, it's still very comfortable, especially to drive it in a very relaxing and very casual manner. What is that? Sound like a blown stereo? But anyways, we're not here to drive this casually. Let's do our first pull of the day. Oh my god. Coming up on our first stop here. Let's take this turn. Oh. It's definitely not as explosive as my ZL1 for sure, but then again, it's missing a supercharger and 200 horsepower. But you can definitely feel just how much lighter this car is than the Camaro. I mean, it's painfully obvious. Now let's just see how it handles. We are now in sport mode. Yeah, being low to the ground definitely helps. There's barely any body roll, jeez. It's way more apparent in my ZL1 that you're toggling between the Sport Plus mode and Tour mode than you are in the Vette. Even though this is hydraulic steering versus the electric steering that we had in the Camaro, it doesn't feel like it's much more stiff than the electric Sport Plus mode that we had in the Camaro ZL1. Not sure if that's just a GrandSport thing, but I don't really recall the C6 being that much better. But one thing for sure is very noticeable is slowing down and feeling the transfer of weight, especially in the corners. But let's get another feel for that acceleration. God, it's just so incredibly planted, man. The Corvette is just It's so confidence inspiring, man, especially on the curves. Yeah, and the brakes are also incredibly sufficient for the amount of weight that this car has. We're lucky to have this type of setup. Basically the same thing that you would find on the Z06, which is what I mentioned earlier. And boy, is that useful. All right, guys, so now let's go ahead and dial it back down to the tour mode, which, by the way, on Sport Plus, or the Sport mode, it's not really that terrible. We're gonna dial it to the tour mode, and honestly, it's very minimal, the difference between the tour mode and the Sport mode. Oh, ah. It kind of sounds like the stereo's down, bro. Hey, yo, T, you gotta fix something with your Corvette, bro. Tour mode and Sport mode, it's not like a huge difference in terms of driving and going over bumps. On the ZL1, it is definitely a lot more noticeable than it is on the Corvette. What a beautiful, beautiful sound, man. Let's get an underpass. Oh, got a little loose there. Oh, God, man. Man, that LS3 is just so damn unique, man. Brakes will get you out of trouble very quick, man. Now, we haven't obviously been testing this car too much on a track situation, but let me just say that driving it in the street with some, you know, corners here and there and some wide open spaces, this thing is an absolute beast, man. Now, one thing that I will complain about, that I don't really like about the Grand Sport, is the shifter position. I'm just not a big fan of how the shifter is located and the way it's kind of like angled off to the side. I feel like it gives me a lot more room for error and like locking out like I've done previously in this video. Look at where my knees are compared to the shifter. I mean, literally, I could just boom, back into second or back into third. The positioning is a little weird, but I guess it's just really getting used to it. This was amazing. The 5th generation Camaro ZL1 and the C6 Corvette Grand Sport are two incredibly fun and exciting cars to drive. But let's be honest, these cars are over a decade old at this point, and they come with their fair share of common problems. For example, the 5th generation ZL1 has that pesky supercharger isolator coupler that tends to go bad. I actually had to replace it on my 5th generation ZL1. Also, that dynamic magnetic ride control tends to fail as well. And because there's no easily accessible OEM replacement parts, when it's time to replace it, it ends up being very expensive, which is why most people end up switching to coilovers, which is what I plan to do when this eventually fails. Also, that LSA engine is known for having heat soaking issues, especially when you start to do the modifications that I have, which essentially make way more boost. You yourself as the driver could possibly heat soak from the blend air doors failing, which is something that's pretty common with these 5th generation Camaros, especially the earlier one. There's plenty of other examples on Camaro 5 where you can learn more about these cars and how to deal with the common problems. Now, the C6 Corvette Grand Sport is not exempt from common problems, and even though it doesn't have the LS7 valve drop that the older brother C6 Z06 has, it has its fair share of common problems like the harmonic balancer wobble that is fatal when it comes to these belt-driven engines. And one of the common problems actually unfolded during this review, which was that Targa roof panel giving us some issues, which was causing that obnoxious creaking and cracking as we were going over any sort of bump or imperfection or even turn. Another common problem with these C6 Grand Sports and really the Corvettes in general is the torque tube couplers and bearings failing. Those bearings can basically break on any car. It actually happened on my 5th Gen SS. The torque tube has to be disassembled by basically dropping the rear end. Makes it such a difficult job to do at home and or at a shop. And of course, like most cars that are over a decade old, there's a lot more electrical components in the C6 Grand Sport that are prone to failing. Again, the best place to check it out is on the Corvette forums. Coming to a final decision is going to be a very difficult one for me to make. If I were to start all over again, I would choose the 5th generation Camaro ZL1. And it's not because I'm a Camaro guy, but because it just checks off far more boxes than the C6 Corvette Grand Sport. And overall, it's just the better overall car. I mean, I'm not surprised considering that this car is, again, the top tier 5th gen Camaro. It's like the Turbo S of the 5th gen Camaro. Not to mention that the LSA is a mod-friendly powerhouse that doesn't require as much funds like you would need on the LS3 to make some serious explosive power. The ZL1 carries its weight nicely on the straight lines with that explosive power, which it's just not the same for the C6 Corvette Grand Sport. Even though it is lighter and does have a good amount of acceleration and torque, it just doesn't compare to the excitement of the 5th generation Camaro ZL1. And not only does it carry its weight on the straights, the ZL1 does an incredible job on the curves and handling. I mean, it's honestly shocking how good the suspension with the magnetic ride control pair is, considering that it is a muscle car or pony car. But the reality is that the C6 Corvette Grand Sport is a race car. It has an entirely different suspension. And even though, yes, the magnetic ride control is not as apparent and rather disappointing when you compare it to the 5th gen ZL1, it's still a race car with race suspension at the end of the day. So if you're looking for a car that is purely track focused or you want to handle better, the C6 Corvette Grand Sport is definitely the better one objectively. But it's not just the performance that sells me on the 5th gen ZL1, it's also the fact that it's a great all-around car. It's practical, it's spacious, it's comfortable to drive in a performance fashion and also in a nonchalant fashion as well. Coming up with that decision was incredibly difficult, and honestly guys, your goal should not be to choose between the two of them, but to own both of them. I hope you guys found this video informative and somewhat entertaining as well. Go ahead and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. And of course, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Guys, we're almost at 100,000 subscribers. And guys, last but not least, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my future videos and future reviews. Guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.